Welcome back. I've got Sam Goodner online. Sam, how are you today?
Michael, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a bit, so I'm glad we're finally able to chat today. So, why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we're going to jump into the work you do, your book, and everything else.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I've been a serial technology entrepreneur for the past 30 years. That's not unique in and of itself. I'm here in Austin, Texas. I've run companies anywhere from IT services firms, software companies, to the recent one as a parking technology business. But my unique background and sort of backstory is while I was born in the US, my parents moved to Europe when I was one, and I grew up in Switzerland. My parents became Swiss, I became Swiss. And for all men in Switzerland, we have compulsory military service. So after high school and before going to college, I served a couple of years as an officer in the Swiss Army before coming back to the US to go to college, where I've been here ever since. So sort of that background, initially I didn't even realize how much it impacted how I ran companies. But looking back at the last 30 years, it had a huge impact on the operational discipline that I think I brought to the companies that I ran, which is why a year and a half ago I retired for the second time temporarily to go write that book that I've always wanted to write and been keeping notes on for 25 years. It's called Like Clockwork, Run Your Business with Swiss Army Precision, where I sort of tell stories from my time in the Swiss Army and principles that I learned there and have later then applied at the different companies I've run. And so that was sort of the genesis for the book and sort of my backstory.
It's a great book, and and we were talking about this in the pre-show. It's like we're both kind of two peas in the same pod because I am a big, and I didn't serve in the military, but my dad did, my grandfather did, I have
Yeah.
lots of family members that did, and in studying history and understanding things, so the one of the common character traits that I see with people that have served is that it's a precision, get to the point. What's our mission? What are we trying to accomplish here? Okay, what do we need to have? What do we have? What do we need to do to make this successful? And it cuts out a lot of the fluff that unfortunately so many businesses tend to have in the meeting rooms, and not necessarily by design in some cases, but in other places, yes. But it just kind of creeps in, and it's like literally trying to run through mud. And you know this, it's like, if you're out on the battlefield, yeah, running through mud is not a lot of fun. So, and it's certainly not a lot of fun in operations and working within an organization.
No, you had Nate Amidon on your show recently, who hires, of course, veterans at his organization. And I listened to that podcast, really good, great podcast, by the way. And I could relate to almost everything he said. And I think regardless of which military you've served with, whether it's in the US or abroad, we share a lot of those same sort of execution, mission-oriented principles that are probably universal in the military and that have a lot of applicability in business.
Very much so. And I think that, whenever there's an opportunity, when I hear people looking for leaders, I'm like, well, contact your local military offices, look for some recent retirees from the service. They understand the X's and O's as best as anyone. And, the skill set and the training you have is there's so many transferable skills. And I know that's not by design per se. It just works that way because organizations that thrive and grow and can be agile and navigate through whatever we're facing, whether it's pandemics or wars or global trade conflicts, supply chain issues, you name it, all these things are external things that are happening. That's what we're seeing out on the field right now. Okay, what do we need to do to navigate around it or through it? What do we have? What do we need to acquire? And again, it just gets to the point. And I worked in nonprofit, which is I say this, and I love people in nonprofit. I have a lot of friends that are in the industry. Sometimes they have a real tough time getting to the point. they're, they feel the feels, which is okay, good. They're passionate about the cause. I agree, but we need to execute eventually, because otherwise we're not going to fix or help anybody. And that's why I'm always attracted to when I see organizations, doing great things and launching things. I'm like, wow, they just rolled out another initiative, and wow, that went really well too. It's like, okay, what are they drinking over there? What's in the Kool-Aid? Because I think there's some stories or lessons that could be shared.
Yes.
So your book, so many little nuggets in there, but one of the things that jumped out, and I made a note of it. I'm and we see the stats, and we're going to talk about boot camp first. And I know that's not necessarily the first part of the book necessarily, but boot camp and orientation, new hires. The stat I saw a couple years ago, and I forget who did it. I'll put it in the show notes when I find it. But they indicated that if an employee is properly onboarded in an organization, there's a 65% likelihood that they're going to last more than 1 year. Because turnover is a huge problem in many organizations. And I had never connected boot camp to onboarding until I read your book. And I thought, this makes so much sense because without a proper boot camp, without getting you prepared and trained for all the things you could possibly face, you're not going to do well as a soldier. You're setting yourself up for failure. So that's why boot camp is so critically important. So when you were writing the book, and especially that section, what were some things that you had made notes of in the 25 years that you've been writing this book?
Yeah. So, first of all, here's what I've noticed. I have noticed that the vast majority of companies fall short when it comes to onboarding new employees. It's an afterthought at best. And it's a real pity. I don't know all the stats that you know. It's sort of for me, it came almost intuitively. But for us, and we called it boot camp, but most companies simply call it employee onboarding. But I'm not talking about HR onboarding or just the kind of the administrative onboarding stuff that everybody has to do. I'm talking about setting aside real time with senior leadership for new classes of employees joining your firm to become aligned with your organization. You actually take the time, however much time. In our case at Catapult Systems, we had a boot camp that lasted anywhere from 2 to 4 days, depending on the department that you joined. But at minimum, it was 2 full days. And we were hiring employees all over the country. So once a month, when we had critical mass of 10 to 15 new employees, we'd bring them all to headquarters in Austin, Texas. And day one of boot camp is what I talk about the most in the book. We called it informally employee indoctrination day. And I led that day personally. It was so important to us that they become connected with who we were as an organization that I took one full day out of my time as founder and CEO of the company a month to teach that class. To make it more memorable, because of my military background, of course, I put on combat boots, fatigues, a black catapult t-shirt, and a red beret to make it sort of a little bit more memorable, but it was not a military boot camp. What did we talk about there? We talked about things that really very few companies take the time to talk about. Things like, what do we fundamentally believe in as a company? What is our history? Where do we come from? How were we created? Why are we here today? Where are we going? What do we aspire to become? What are the core tenets that we believe in and how we work with one another and how we work with our customers? And you do that by telling stories. And of course, throughout that first day, it's an opportunity for that class of new employees, right? That 10 to 15 new employees that have come in from all over the country to also really get to know one another. So they feel already like they're part of this kind of graduating or incoming class of new employees for the company. Those are relationships that they're going to keep long after they go back to their respective offices, so they can pick up the phone and call John and go, hey, remember this? And I have a question about that. So it forges real bonds for them. It gets them, you take the time to really share your core belief systems with your new employees so that they know why are we, Simon Sinek, popularized the whole notion of, employees that understand your why, your purpose are going to be better aligned, more engaged with your organization. We sort of did that instinctively. We talked about that. We already were talking about that in 1993. So It's so important. And we had industry leading um, low employee turnover rate at Catapult Systems in an industry that is well known for having 30% annual employee turnover rate. The IT services industry, we had typically 10, so a third the national average. And I think in large part due to that initial employee onboarding program that get everybody aligned with the company.
And also create a sense of belonging and
Yes.
camaraderie. You know,
Yes.
you'll do anything to protect your fellow service people. And you build that in, and you were going over, on that, day one, the mission, vision, values of organizations. For most companies, that's a poster on a wall somewhere in the building, and they're they mean well, but do people live it? And by you doing what you did and everybody reflecting on it, it carries forward. And I think back to a company that I helped out, and I gave a talk at one of their events. And this was an insurance company on the East Coast. And they had seen and continue to see some rapid growth, and they grew quite a bit. They basically 3x'd during the first 2 years of the pandemic. The pandemic wasn't the reason why their insurance company grew. It just, by nature and their desire and the plans, they were very strategic, because those first, couple years, after the pandemic started, the majority of their employees had never been together. Everybody
Yeah.
was remote, but they were intentional on making sure that everyone felt and they belonged there, they were engaged. So I go to speak at this event, which is the first time that they brought the entire organization together since things opened up. So there was roughly 100 employees there,
Yeah.
and the majority of them, this is the first time that they've met each other, from the CEO, the VP, all the way through the ranks. It felt like a family reunion.
Yeah.
The love that was in that room, I can feel it right now. It was so intense. They were so happy to be there. They were so happy to be with each other. Since then, they've doubled in size again. Why? Because they have a system, they have a plan, they have intention. They have been around for a long time. And a lot of times you see companies that have been around a long time, they kind of hit a plateau where they kind of get there. They're, they act like, we're just starting. And they are. And it's such a beautiful thing to watch. But again, I sit back and go, okay, I reverse engineer it and go, okay, what are they doing differently? And it's the belonging, it's the mission. Everyone knows everything. They know what everybody else can do. If they don't, there's an easy way to find out. And it's just everyone is in this giving and serving mentality. And that's why they're crushing it. And I see that and I go, companies out there that aren't doing that, you could. It's
Yeah.
easy to do, but unfortunately, it's easy not to do.
Yeah. Yeah, you speak to a lot of companies when they draft their core value statement or their core values and core purpose. They're just marketing statements on a wall. And it's really unfortunate. That's not what they should be. First of all, they shouldn't be aspirational. You shouldn't just have your marketing team go draft a set of aspirational core values. That's not the point. You go through an exercise that's, was made famous by Jim Collins on how to uncover your actual existing core values that have been there, frankly, since the founders founded the company. If you've not codified them, you go through this exercise, you uncover them. And then the key is not only to, of course, introduce them during an employee orientation program, but then every single month. So we had all hands company meetings every month. The employee awards we gave out were core value awards, where employees would nominate their peers that embodied a certain core value, and they would explain why I'm nominating Sally for this core value award and what she did to exemplify that behavior. We would all of our employee reviews were core values based reviews. How did you live up to our core values or how did you not? That was front and center. The first things we looked at employee, reasons why we promoted or exited employees were they aligned with our core belief system or not? That's always number one. So it's really important, A, that they not be aspirational, that they be real, and two, that organizations live with, live them every single day.
Yeah, it just where I don't want to say it's autopilot, it's just part of your existence. And
Yes.
when you are in an environment like that, and I remember I worked for a dot-com startup. This is, a quarter century ago, which
Yeah.
I'm still flabbergasted that it's, been a quarter century, but I can do math and I'm like, yep, that's easy math. It's 2025 at the time of this recording, and I started working there in 2000. So easy math for me. Just take away the quarter and you're good. But I remember this was during, for those that worked in the IT industry during that time, it was an absolute circus. And I was in Chicago at the time, and recruiters would place me because there was a shortage of IT personnel. So that's where the H-1B visa came into play, and they had a ton of talent coming from all over the world to address the demand of IT services, and it was just an absolute zoo because a recruiter would place me in an organization, and then the recruiters usually will follow up with you and say, how's it going, everything good? And that during that time they would literally call me 6 months later and they'd say, when I think the agreement was done, and they'd say, so how do you like the job? And I said, well, it's great. I'm having a lot of fun here. Do you really like it? Yeah. Why? Because I got another job over here that pays 20,000 more a year. You have my attention because I was in my 20s. You're like, look, it's about making bank, kids. But eventually I got to this organization, and when I got in there, it was like your organization. I knew the CEO and the COO first name basis, and they're over 1,000 employees, global organization now. Knew them first. They knew my name. They knew they knew what I did. It was just one of those. Okay, I'm gonna crush down walls. So when that recruiter called, I'd say, Dan, I'm good here. So you can put me on check with me in a couple of years, but I'm good. And stayed there, rode the wave, rode the crash, and ended up going into a different career path after that. Not because of the crash. Quite frankly, I probably could still be working there, but I chose to go a different direction. But it was one of those things where I remember that a quarter century later. It's
Yeah.
something that's in there, and the people that have worked for you, and whether it was during your Swiss Army days to present day, um, it, people remember leaders that made them feel a part of something bigger, and you carry that forward through your entire life. And for me, the only way I could pay it back is like, as a leader, what can I do to have somebody feel the same way about me? It's not an ego thing. It's more of I want to have a positive impact on these people's lives so they can be a positive impact in their community and their families, everything else. There's a lot of connection points here.
The biggest reward for me is when two things. Number one, when I run into people that I've worked with over 30 years that come to me and say, Sam, some of the best relationships I've ever had in my life that last to this day, I made while working at one of your companies. Like those friendships that I forged there, like that was the best man at my wedding. My best friend. You raised kids together, lifelong relationships that were created within the context of the organizations that I founded. There's nothing more rewarding than that. And number two, when I see a former employee go off and start their own business, which I love. I keep a list in my file cabinet of all the employees that I'm aware of that have gone off and started a business of their own. In fact, it's timely. I literally got an email from the employee of one of those former employees of mine, literally via LinkedIn this morning, and he reached out to me and said, Sam, you don't know me, but I work for Patriot Consulting. My boss and CEO, Joe Stalker, used to work for you. I know you've mentored him over the years to help start his business, Patriot Consulting. It's our 10-year anniversary. We all loving here. We all love working here. He keeps talking with great such fondness of his former company, yours, and all the principles that he brought from Catapult Systems to Patriot Consulting. Would you record a short congratulations video for our 10-year anniversary party at my house this weekend. I'm like, absolutely. That kind of stuff is what you live for.
You just gave me chills there, Sam. That's beautiful. That is a testimony. That is one of those things going, okay, this is all worth it. And before we wrap up, and we don't have time to go through all of them, but in one of the things that again jumped out, and many things in the book, but one of the things that jumped out was the 60 golden rules. And everybody's like, 60? So yeah, 60. So share with us, what that's about and, maybe share a couple of them.
Yeah. So at one point, several years into running Catapult Systems, our Microsoft focused IT consulting firm, like all startups, we just got started. We hired people, we threw them to the work, and we just kept growing and growing and growing. But we realized after a while that a lot of our new employees were making the same mistakes that we ourselves used to make when we got started in the IT consulting field. The same silly mistakes over and over again. And finally, we're like, listen, we need to do something about this. And so we decided we need to codify our best practices. First of all, let's figure out what they are. So I went first, I started with my own, then I went to my executive team, and I went to all the smartest people across the company, our senior project managers, our technical architects, our best salespeople. And I'm like, listen, if you were coaching your own daughter or son in your role, and you had to impart on them words of wisdom to how to be successful in your role, in your part of the business, what are some key tenets that you'd want to pass on to them? And said, don't worry about wordsmithing them, we'll do that later. And we collected these from across the entire organization, right? Again, an IT consulting firm. And we ended up with 60. And it spans, all areas of our business from building, relationships with customers to how to close a deal to how to deliver, a project. And we codified these in a small, sort of easy to read booklet called our 60 Golden Rules of Customer Service. We, of course, we mentioned our boot camp, our employee onboarding program. We covered about half of those during the afternoon of the first day of boot camp in the form of storytelling. It's always, human beings, we remember principles better if they're told as a story, right? So if I tell you, you only have one chance to make a first impression, that's one of the rules. You're like, I've heard that before. That's great. If I tell you a story of how, a real story of how, a couple of our consultants a few years ago didn't make a great first impression by accident and the consequences of that, you're going to remember that story forever. And so that was the idea. Number one is, what are our best practices? Let's codify them so that we can train them and then so that they're repeatable. This is a big theme in the book is, understand what your best practices are, codify them, train them so they're repeatable. And then that's what we did. I included all 60 of those in the appendix of my book just because at this point I love to share. But yeah, that's what those were.
Yeah, if you read anything, I always say don't read the end of the book first, but that might be a good foundation. Then go back to it after you've read the book. It'll hammer it home even more. So, Sam, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work?
Yeah, thank you. So if you want to find out more about me, my website is samgoodner.com. The book, Like Clockwork, Run Your Business with Swiss Army Precision, is available on Amazon, both in book format and Audible. So there you have it.
Awesome. Definitely have that in the show notes. So, Sam, thank you for being you, and I've enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure.